Good afternoon, everybody. This is the afternoon of May 23rd, 2022. I'm Councilmember Peter Shea, the Vice Chair of the Public Works and Utilities Committee, filling in for Chairman and Councilmember Keith Waring. The first order of business, I'm going to ask Councilmember, would you go, Councilmember Bowden? There you are. If you lead us in a prayer or an invocation, please, sir.
Sure. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together today with a purpose of serving the citizens of our great city. We ask you for wisdom as we make these weighty decisions, and we thank you for the inclination to serve. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. You should have a copy of the May 9, 2022 minutes. I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any changes, objections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Going down to temporary encroachments, item number F, Mr. O'Brien.
Yes, sir, Councilmember Shade. We just have some standard irrigation, some fences, one right angle sign, and a couple of benches in the right of way. All of them have been investigated by staff, and we're recommending for approval and offering to the committee for information only.
I just have two questions just so close to me. One is the 193 King Street. Is that by the bridal shop?
Yes, sir. And they have kind of a recessed area right there. And they want to put two benches right up against the wall. And that's since we're such a walking city, as long as they're not disrupting the pedestrian pathway, that's been an encroachment we tended to allow, and just make sure they don't block the pedestrian right way.
Okay. I think I complained about one of those signs before, just because I think it was hanging a little low.
Well, yes, sir. We took care of one of those signs. And also, I will tell you, I think at 193.3, they also wanted to put a podium out in the middle of the sidewalk, and we told them they couldn't do that.
Okay. And then just out of curiosity, I noticed one on Broad Street, 41, for a lawyer. But you don't have to mention any comment. I just saw that out there. I mentioned both of those. Anybody have any questions or comments from Mr. O'Brien about these temporary encroachments? All right. Public Service Department update on proposed changes to trash collection methods.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Matt Altop, our environmental services supervisor, is going to make a short presentation. This is for information only. We're constantly looking, as all y'all I'm sure probably aware, due to heavy volume and lack of just personnel to make some collections. We've been running about a week, a couple of days behind every week in our trash collection. So Matt and I have been looking at ways to become more efficient in this operation, and we've got a presentation we'd like to make. And this was just for information only at this time, but it's something to talk about a new method of collection in most of the city, which we would hope to phase in through a capital plan over the next few years. So we talked with Amy's people, with our budget officer Corey, and also Andrew Jones in finance, to kind of lay out a path forward. But we really want to just kind of give you a presentation right now on the equipment and answer any questions you may have. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt at this time.
I think we're all more than happy to see what kind of improvements to make life easy for Mr. Altop. So Matt.
My life being easy makes your guys' life easy.
Well, that would be a two-way street. Yes,
that's true. So if I can get to share my screen, I can show this presentation.
So far, no sharing. There you go.
All right, it should be coming up now. You guys able to see it?
Yep.
So we looked at a few different ways to convert from our current system, which is now claw-based and scow-based. So currently we use 6 claws and 3 dump trucks per claw to pick up the yard debris and bulk items in the city. We use a knuckle boom to pick up the bulk when we have enough employees. That's 4 pieces of equipment per route that we just don't have staff for at the moment. Claw parts and materials and items are extremely difficult to get at this time due to a lot of the stuff being shipped in on containers and things. So when a unit is down, it's down for a significant part of time. So we got to looking at some other ways that we could possibly cut back on some expenses, and help with the employee shortages. So we're looking at a new system which would be primarily knuckle boom based and would have only 2 crews that would run claws and scows, which would be mainly on the peninsula, as it's a lot tighter and it wouldn't allow for a knuckle boom to run. However, we could use the knuckle booms on Upper Peninsula, James Island, and West Ashley. So current equipment, we have 27 pieces of equipment currently, and moving to the new system, we would have 22 pieces. So we would reduce the number of vehicles by 5 once we get this thing up and running. Here's our current system, or our current claw and scow system estimated annual equipment cost is about $734,000 a year. The maintenance is about $262,000 a year, and our estimated fuel cost is $252,000 a year. Switching to the knuckle boom and reducing some of that equipment reduces, our annual equipment costs, reduces our maintenance and our fuel costs by removing those vehicles off the road. Current system, we collect 234 cubic yards of debris is what we are capable of collecting right now. By switching to the knuckle booms, we'd be able to increase that by 41,000 cubic yards and still have a savings attached to that. Our current system requires 27 people, and that's without backup drivers. The new system would require 22 employees. And you can see we would not be laying anybody off. Nobody would lose their job. It would just be basically closing out vacant positions that we're having trouble hiring for. So it wouldn't be any layoff scenarios or anything like that. But our estimated right now is about $1.3 million in labor costs, and that would estimated go down to about 1.1 million. So here's our current claw system. Our total annual collection cost is about 2.6 when you add everything in, and our estimated total for the knuckle boom would be just over 2 million. And you can see the total collection cost per cubic yard is significantly higher way we're doing it now than it is if we were to switch to primary knuckle booms in the future.
Hey, Matt, before you go to this next screen, go come out to this cubic foot.
Okay. Cubic foot.
The cost per cubic.
The cost per cubic, okay. That
Okay.
one?
No, the one you just had it up before you went to that. It was a cost. It was $11 or something cents.
Oh yeah, so our estimated right now is $11.16 per cubic yard is what we have estimated the collection cost is right now for the way we're doing it. If we switch to primary knuckle booms, that would go down to $7.59 per cubic yard.
And that's what is being charged us when we make these drops.
So no, so that is basically you take all the cubic yards and divide that out by the cost, and that gives you a cost per yard. So that's fuel, maintenance, equipment costs, employee, all that stuff calculated in there, and then divided by the
Okay.
cubic yard.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot more sense.
No problem. And then here is our estimated savings from our proposed new system to our current system. So we would save on average estimated about $520,000 a year by switching to a more knuckle-based type program.
Okay.
So
So
that was,
Matt, that looks like a $500,000 saving, plus you have less downtime as well.
yes, so there are some added benefits with moving to a more knuckle boom based system. Hurricane cleanup would be improved because there are significant amount of vehicles out there now collecting debris instead of just the 6 claws. We'd have the 18 knuckle booms out there collecting. The idle time right now, if the scows have to leave the claws and go dump, that claw sits there and waits for those gals to come back to route before they can continue to load. So the downtime, the idle time, hurricane cleanup would all be improved by switching to this model.
Does any member of the committee have a question for Matt?
But Mr. Chairman, is not a question. I just want to make sure everybody's clear that this is not for garbage. This is just for trash and debris, correct, Matt?
That's correct. That's just for yard debris and bulk.
Yard debris and bulk.
So when people are trimming down their trees and haul them off to the sidewalk, or they're throwing away an old dresser, this is what will be used to collect these items.
That's correct. Yes. And we have done a study already on this with the knuckle booms that we have to make sure that this was a viable option. And we can run 3 knuckle booms on a route and get the route completed in the same amount of time as what we're doing it now.
Now, Matt, will this be used throughout the whole city, or our private contractors will not be using the system, right?
No, this is just our stuff. Yes, that's correct. It's just ours.
But this will not be going over to Daniel Island or to Outer West Ashland.
That's correct. This is just the routes that we service with city crews. However, we do send a knuckle boom over to Daniel Island when our contractor requests help.
Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
What do our contractors use?
So our contractors usually use Trident uses garbage trucks for leaves. And then for the big stuff, they have a knuckle boom that they come through with and collect. And then Capital Waste uses a garbage truck. They'll come in, pick up all garbage, go dump, and then come back and pick up yard waste and bulk.
I see. And how do they put it into the garbage truck?
They use 2 guys on the back of the truck, which opens them up to, liability, injuries, and different things. That's why we moved away from that. It's, couches and mattresses being stuffed in the back of a garbage truck it's not ideal.
Right. And we're going to have back doors on the trucks, right?
So yes, we are working with the manufacturers of the knuckle booms to add a back door to the cab. If we don't add that door, they have to climb out of the truck, down, and then back up on the platform. So we've been working with the manufacturers to come up with a solution to adding a back door. I think we've got that pretty much nailed down. And hopefully we'll be able to retrofit a truck by the end of the year to do that testing.
Y'all, I don't know who went to the Public Works Department when they had all the different pieces of equipment out there for inspection.
Not me. We lost you, Mayor. You froze up on us.
So I can
Mentioned
answer.
big impact on his knees, climbing up and down. So they cost a little bit more money, but
Mayor, you
spend that more. They add a third door, excuse me,
Mayor,
out the back, so you don't have to climb up and down.
Mayor, your connection was fading in and out, so we didn't catch all of that comment, but I think we got the gist of it.
You got the gist of it?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Any other committee member have a question? So Matt or Tom, is this something we're going to put for the budget in the 2023?
Yes, sir. Mr. Shade, we're working with Amy and her staff to phase this in over 5 years, Matt, isn't that correct?
No, so we would hope to have this phased in by 2025. Our goal is to purchase 3 additional in 23, 3 additional in 24, and 3 additional in 25, and then purchase 2 spares in 26. And that would get us to where we need to be.
So this will be a phase-in project.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Matt, you said something, and I think that our community just needs to be aware of this from time to time. The city is not uniform in how it's laid out. Certainly the narrow streets on the peninsula provide a different challenge for you. And we have to customize our collection of garbage and debris based upon what part of the city we're servicing. And that's just always an issue it's not, I'm not criticizing that. I mean, that's just reality, and it sort of complicates your mission a little bit, and which you can and cannot use equipment wise. So it's just something we just need to be mindful of as we go through these issues. Listen, as soon as we get the stuff online and bring it in, the better I think all of us would feel. So let's go do it. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Well, one more question, Matt. Is anybody making an electric knuckle boom yet?
So they're in testing, but nothing has been set in stone as far when they think they're going to be ready for the boom. The garbage trucks are ready and are being distributed, and there are some pretty significant savings on those right now. So hopefully by the time we get ready to purchase those will still be in effect.
Very good. All right. Any other questions, comments, suggestions? Matt, as always, anything that you could do to give us advance warning of a delay in collection just makes our jobs a lot much easier. I take the emails and the notices that are coming out of are distributed. I place them on Facebook, send them to my neighborhood association presidents to give them a heads up. So that makes life, as long as we tell people what's going on, I think they appreciate the advance notice. There's going to be a delay. I mean, that's just the reality that we're facing in communicating with our constituents. It's always a better deal.
We are running a day behind this week, and I'll get something out to you guys here by the end of the day. We had to go back and finish some of Thursday's stuff. It's just a significant amount of debris being placed out for collection.
Yep. All right, Matt, thank you all. Mr. O'Brien, thank you very much. Good report, and we look forward to these new equipments being phased in. And if you want to get rid of some of the old stuff and buy new ones sooner, that's fine with me as well.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Fountain, are you with us?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see your light, but not you. There you are. Okay.
The camera does what it can.
Well, light, the speed of light is faster than the speed of your glasses, I think. You gonna give us an update and some information on the small project allocation?
Yes. Share my
Okay.
screen. So the previous options we looked at basically this setup, which left us at roughly 1.3 million and just over 1.3 and 1.2 for the next 2 years. Obviously, we have a $1 million per budget year budget allocation to distribute. So we went back and tried to revise that plan based on the intent of the committee last time and trying to keep the majority of the projects. Came up with this approach. I guess this is in some ways the one area for budgeting purposes that the delays in everything from contractors, logistics, engineers might, I guess, benefit, to keep all the projects, and that we can't probably get to all of them in this fiscal year, since we wouldn't be starting until June, most likely, with the council approval in late May. So we basically stretched our time period into 2023 into 2024. Obviously, the downsides of allocating this way, which is some of what we're running into this year, is that you're basically allocating not just this year's money, but future money. So it's harder to add additional projects in future years. So this approach would basically consume the resources for this year, next year, and then part of the 2024 cycle as well. While we're continuing to work on projects this year from last year, and we'll be working on the new 2022 projects in addition to that. So I'm happy to answer any questions. This takes it down to 1,050,000 and 1,090,000, which are probably approachable based on potentially having a little bit of slip even from these numbers with the way scheduling tends to be going. But if anyone has any questions, I can talk through those, or needs any reminders of which projects or which, I'm happy to talk about that as well.
So Matt, just for clarification, and you said this, it's pretty obvious, but looking at this spreadsheet, items 3, 4, 5, and 6 are projects in progress.
3, 4, 5, and 6. Yes, that's correct, Councilman. So those are projects that we had allocated some money in 2021 with the understanding that we would need additional money in 2022. So those are our projects that we're already working on, correct?
And as you said earlier, that would carry over into the 2022, this current year ends in 2023, and one of them into 2024. So those monies are already kind of dog-eared, for lack of a better way of saying. The projects that are in progress carry over until 2 more, maybe 3 more years until they're completed.
I mean, you're correct. There are projects that have sunk cost already. So generally, those are projects that are continued for allocation. But of course, that's the option for the committee and council on how they want to allocate.
Right. It just doesn't make sense to stop in midstream. If we've got something going, we'll want to finish it out.
I generally agree, yes.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
So Matt, thank you for this, and thanks to you and to us that we're keeping all of these projects alive and going. And in my view, even though you do mention it might reduce the ability in the future, a couple of years out, to add new projects. I mean, these are the ones that have been around for a long time that we've known about, that we know need to be taken care of. And so, I mean, you don't have another list of those, do you?
No, you're right, Mary. This is all of the currently identified projects. We always do, each year we do find new projects as we work through maintenance work and find something that's beyond the capacity of a maintenance crew to manage.
Right.
But these are all the ones that we currently are aware of, including some, like you mentioned, that are kind of these longer term projects we've been trying to find methods to solve.
Great. So when I see 2022 spend and you've got some dollars there by every single project, does that mean that some level of activity will occur on all of those projects this year? Or not
That is
necessarily?
yes, that is the intent, Mayor. Again, whether we hit that or not, that is the goal, is what we think we can likely allocate and get to this year. I don't know. And when we start talking about cash flow, this starts to get more complicated in that we allocate money. But since we don't allocate normally till about the midpoint of the year, we're typically currently spending money from last year's allocation.
Right.
We will do basically, likely what will happen is we'll spend about half of the 2022 spend money this year and then half next year in a cash flow basis.
Right.
But since we're only allocating $1 million a year, the cash flow still works out that it supports that project approach. So
Right.
this is like the encumbrance of 2022 money. That $1 million likely will get to about, again, 500,000 of that within the 2022 calendar year, and then finish the other 500,000 at the beginning of 2023 before we have a meeting to talk about any 2023
Right.
allocation.
Well, unless somebody's got an objection, that all sounds good to me. I'd say Godspeed. Let's set you loose and get going. Does this, Mr. Chairman, we need a motion. I move we approve this list, this funding, and give Matt the authorization to move forward.
Second.
All right. Any further questions or discussion? I agree wholeheartedly. Let's. I see at least 2 of projects in my district are either in progress or starting to be in progress. So Matt, thank you for what we've accomplished there. Any further discussion, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. All right, that was easy. And Matt, I know I got a copy of this before. Have you circulated this among the rest of our council?
I have not circulated the updated version, Councilman. We didn't change any of the projects on the list. We just shifted the cash flow component. So I'll send the updated cash flow approach out as well.
Okay, thanks. Very good. You moving on to the spring fish burn update?
Yes, let me share that presentation. All right, let's go into presentation mode. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm bringing an update that includes all of the phases of the project because we do have some new council members. I'll try to move relatively quickly through the completed portions of the project that most of the council members are more familiar with. But if there are any questions, certainly feel free to interject and stop me to fill in more details. This is just kind of a relatively brief update on where we stand with the project and in preparation for basically what we'll be doing contractually the rest of the calendar year with the project. So again, front cover is just some highlighted photos as well as some of the partners who've worked with us on the project from engineering and construction. Just a reminder, the origin is basically, it's called the Spring Fishburne Project colloquially because it's the spring basin and the Fishburne Basin from the 1984 drainage study, which are centered along the US 17 corridor or the Septim B. Clark corridor. Obviously, it's a major point for the medical district access. It's one of the city's primary evacuation routes. The road historically has seen over 63,000 vehicles per day that travel along it, and that number has been increasing every year. So we'll see what the new DOT numbers come out at. Obviously, it's a critical corridor for the city. Part of the origin of the project was also demonstration that there were more than 250 accidents per year on the road, many of which were rear endings due to flooding situations from sudden stops or sudden issues. That was part of what brought about some of the DOT support for the project. There's also some federal money, which we'll mention, that was originated basically to try to reconnect the communities that were separated by obviously the original crosstown portion of the project, which I think we've probably heard about in pretty good detail. Some of the council members do a good job of bringing that up and discussing the really negative like societal impacts that 17 had from separating different levels of income across the peninsula. So again, just a quick overview map. The yellow is the impact areas. Not all of that is directly served by the project, but through this project and a combination of sub-projects, basically the areas that will see some drainage improvement, about 500 acres, again, a significant portion of the peninsula. I think about half of that is direct service if I were to pull the exact numbers. 5 phases of project, about $197, $198 million of funding. The majority of that coming from the state infrastructure bank. We did, as I mentioned, receive a federal Tiger grant at the beginning of the project for trying to reknit some of the communities and add pedestrian access. SCDOTs contributed from the traffic perspective with an early grant in the project. And then, of course, the city, which is through the King Street Gateway TIF. Just a quick cross-sectional view of what it looks like. Basically, a very large deep tunnel under the city being fed by the surface drop shafts that basically connect into the existing collection systems on the surface streets and give that water somewhere to drain to as it flows out and into the wet well, and then can flow either by gravity or through the future pump station out into the river. Phase 1, this was the neighborhood reconnection work, basically installed intelligent transportation systems, which are traffic lights basically that focus on how the traffic is moving in the area. Did a bunch of surface drainage work as well, streetscaping. You kind of see the before and after pictures to kind of what we're used to seeing nowadays on the roadway. Phase 2 is 2017. This was the rest of the surface drainage that was kind of separated out into 2 sections because of the Tiger grant, that you have to kind of work on the Tiger grant elements before you can work on the other elements of the project. This also included adding the 8 vertical shafts to go down to where the eventual tunnel will hit. Phase 3. This was completed in 2020. This was our deep tunnel construction, including 4 access shafts, really large shafts to raise and lower equipment down in the tunnels. Almost 2 miles, a little bit short of 2 miles of 8 and 12 foot diameter tunnels, the large tunnels, and then a series of smaller adits or 6 foot diameter tunnels that tie into those large tunnels to serve different areas, as well as the environmental mitigation work that we had to accomplish in order to basically do the marsh disturbances necessary for phase 4. Phase 4, phase 4, I have more slides for this one. This is the outfall of wet well construction that we're currently working on between the 2 bridges to West Ashley. We started this construction about 2019. Our estimated substantial completion still towards the end of 2022. This phase involves installing 3 very large outfall box culverts out into the river. That was what we call the trestle, sort of the mini bridge that you used to be able to see going out into the river, which is now being removed. Those box culverts are each 8 foot by 10 foot. So they're They're very, very large culverts going out the river to move this water out without creating a velocity high enough to negatively impact the bridges, basically is why you do it this way. We also have the pump station wet well that will basically hold the water for the pumps to be able to cycle without damaging the pumps. The conclusion of this project will result in about a 500% increase in the flow rates from the pre-existing condition project. That's just the gravity component. It does vary a little bit depending on tide. Obviously, at lower tides, you're going to get higher flow rates. At higher tides, you'll get lower flow rates as the tide kind of pushes back against the water. To date, we've excavated just under 50,000 tons of soil from the project, which is what all the shoring and support was for between the bridges there. Obviously, you don't want your bridges to collapse while you're excavating a very large hole between them. Come back and install about 36 million pounds of concrete. For perspective, it's a big project. Put in that outfall culvert system that we talked about, installed the wet well in the head box, which I can talk about what all those things are in more detail if anyone wants, but basically the engineered system to make the pumps be able to work and again, feed into that outfall. We're currently working on installing bar screens for debris removal, putting in the silt removal unit, which will help with water quality going out into the river, and putting together the discharge piping for the dewatering pumps that will go in. Once that's complete, we'll come back and install those actual dewatering pumps, put in the automated components of the debris system, put in our backup electrical generator. It's not the backup for the pumps. The pumps are actually run off of diesel engines. They don't have an electrical backup. This is the backup for the electrical systems in the unit, so everything else can keep working. And then the computer control systems for the project come in phase 4. Just as a reminder, something that's a little more exciting than bullet points, this was the sort of existing condition when phase 4 was getting going. You can see the access shaft for the tunnel that had happened in phase 3, sitting in the middle of the project site. This should be a GIF that will hopefully run. Yep, there it goes. So you can see here the excavation work as we installed basically this excavation support, slowly dug out our way through all of the wet well and outfall. Came back, installed all the piles. Here you can see the formwork and the concrete going in. Here the box culverts have been installed, poured in place. Now they're being backfilled. And then the current project is actually removing, in this final picture, the trestle and the excavation support. And I'll just keep replaying again. If anyone wants to see it in more detail, I can certainly provide it to you, or we can let it run through multiple times. But it's kind of it was an interesting process to watch. Again, this is a few years worth of work occurring in just a few minutes, but it was a very long civil engineering project. We've come back and poured quite a bit of concrete, most of it at night due to the size of the pours. It's a picture just of the top slab support. Basically, once the base concrete's gone in, what we've done to support and stabilize the top slabs that basically, which are the large slabs of concrete, structural concrete that sit on top of the wet well and allow everything to sit up on the deck, the pump engines and the control structure and eventually the building. Again, culverts are completed our inspections, everything is in good condition. This is a view looking down into the tunnel again from the surface.
How deep is that, Matt?
The total depth all the way down is right around 130 feet, 120 feet. The wet well itself is not that deep, just the surface down to the bottom of the tunnel. The wet well, I have to double check, I think it's roughly 40 feet deep. So this is the dewatering pumps that are going in to be able to dewater the tunnels, in addition to the larger pumps that will sit in the wet well itself, which don't dewater the tunnels, they just cycle through the wet well. You can see scale-wise, you can see the gentleman in the kind of the box working on.
He looks like a gnat.
Yeah, it's a big construction site. Then just a kind of a quick before and after comparison. The upper left obviously is that before picture we saw earlier. The right picture is not exactly current, but it's a close to current aerial view showing all that concrete that's been installed. The outfall boxes have been installed, and this is where they're starting to basically backfill. They've been backfilling on top of the culverts. They'll remove the trestle after this, finishing up the top slab pours. We're rapidly trying to acquire all of the cranes in Charleston, feels like sometimes, as we have so many different tasks going on the project site, but a lot getting done. Just a quick status update on the project. Again, we started early 2019. We've been running pretty well. Contractor's been doing some really good work in the last 18 months or so. We are about 3 months behind the original substantial completion date due to a combination of events, mostly in this case, weather days, but also some impacts from kind of, again, thinking all the way back 2019, the impacts of COVID, and then some of the more recent logistics challenges. We're currently working on developing some operations and maintenance plans. So generally, again, a successful project that's going well, but we will have some extension contracts probably to bring forward to council the next session. Phase 5, you probably remember we ordered the 320,000 gallon per minute pumps already from Xylem. That'll result in 1,000% increase in flow versus the 500% that we had seen from the end of phase 4. We've got
Is that an additional increase, Matt, or?
No, that's the increase really above the original existing condition. And again, it varies depending what tide condition you're at. So that's why there's such round numbers, as it gets much more complex depending on what you're seeing from a tide cycle, but roughly 10 times as much flow as you would have seen in an existing condition. And again, that's 360,000 gallons per minute. So it's a pretty good amount of water we're moving out into the river there. The pumps and engines are currently scheduled for a late 2023 delivery. It's good that we got those ordered when we did, as we were able to lock in pricing and materials. Then lastly, we've mentioned this one a little bit at council recently. The medical district extension, of course, ties into this project. That has already started construction, though we're still in the very early stages of that, and we should be complete roughly mid to late next year.
That was a speed lesson in this massive project that's spanned almost 15 years.
From the original design, the original concepts, I should say, were a little over 20 years now, but construction wise, we're sitting, just around 10, a little over 10 years.
Yeah. Wow. It's really quite impressive. And those of us who took a tour several years ago over by the park was getting into those shafts and looking at all that was really quite impressive. Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first off, Matt, whenever there's an opportunity for us to get back on site when it's safe to do so, I know it's tempting to put a bunch of municipal elected officials in a 130-foot deep shaft, maybe close the lid on us, but I think it'd be interesting to check it out. I wasn't on council when the other group got to go, so I think it would be interesting. My question, though, is how unique is this project in the world of stormwater, engineering and municipal work, first in the Southeast and maybe on the East Coast? I mean, is this like a revolutionary type of project? I'm just trying to understand how to frame this in the context of the world, because it seems, from my vantage point, this is mighty, mighty impressive.
I think that's a good definition. Mighty, mighty impressive is a good adjective. Mr. Fountain?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, no, it is an unusual project. Certainly there are some similarities to what you'll see sometimes for sewer service in some areas. I mean, CWS runs a very similar network of tunnels to provide sanitary sewer services across the Charleston area. But you have to remember, sanitary sewer is generally a much, much smaller volume of water than stormwater. That's kind of the whole history of environmental work in the United States, right? As part of it was trying to separate out stormwater from these combined sewers that a lot of the older cities had, because every time it rained, it overwhelmed the wastewater treatment plants and ended up dumping huge amounts of raw sewage into the rivers. So we're basically trying to manage a similar amount of water, to what was causing catastrophic problems in wastewater treatment plants previously. We luckily don't have to treat it to the same level that a wastewater treatment plant would have to. But it's a huge project, huge tunnels. It's very extensive. There are similar sized tunnel systems that go in for whether it's transportation, again, or sewer work, nationally and internationally. But this is a very large stormwater project.
Very good. Well, you and your team are to be applauded, and our predecessors and my colleagues today. I mean, this shows a lot of vision and commitment to stormwater improvement on the peninsula. And I think that it's tremendous to see this coming to fruition. Thank you.
And I should mention, Mr. Chairman, really quickly too, we do have plans for a tour that we're putting together. It likely will not be the deep tunnels this time because of where we are in the construction process, but it will be a tour of the wet well, the control systems, the dewatering area, basically on phase 4. And it's a really neat area to go in and kind of look at all this concrete work that's been done, all the civil work that's been done. So we'll be sending that out with some invitations to council members soon as well.
Count me in. I'm ready. It'd be a great experience.
Yeah, currently it's a 40-foot ladder to get around on the site. So we figure we'll wait till we have a stairway, but we're getting there.
All right. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Matt, when I looked at one of those slides that showed the streetscape, it's just a reminder of what we didn't do back in the 70s when that project was being constructed, and the crosstown to Clark expressway wasn't done properly at the very concept of all of that. So it's all we're doing really is just catching up from about 40 years worth of neglect, I guess, more than anything else, to get this thing working. It looks beautiful out there. So the streetscaping, if nothing else, just looks so much better. There's so much more attractive. There's so much more we can do, but I surely do appreciate how this is shaping up. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Matt, I know you mentioned to me that we would use the dewatering pumps when we reconnect, or when we make that connection from the Earhart shaft extension, tunnel extension to the main system. But just curious, other than emergencies, what are the intended times that you would dewater the tunnel for inspections and such?
Yeah, so one of the primary reasons is for inspections. You also use it to prevent like silt from accumulating in the tunnels. Any basically challenges with debris or silt, you agitate it and basically pump that material up out of the deep tunnels to limit how much maintenance you need to do on those tunnels. If you're doing certain maintenance work on the primary pumps, you can use the dewatering pumps to pull down, again, that water level deep enough for maintenance crews to get into the primary pumps. So it's kind of a series of different processes, all of which are primarily kind of operations and maintenance oriented rather than primary service oriented for flood reduction.
Are they submersible pumps down in the bottom, or?
They are, yeah. They slide down on guide rails generally down into the bottom of the system.
I see. Gotcha. So, and Mr. Chairman and Ross, Councilmember Pell, I would just point out that, and this is one of the reasons why the state helped us out financially, because yes, this is on the peninsula, but it's about transportation. I mean, the Septima Clark Parkway is such a vital connection for really the whole low country. If you think about it, if that thing when that thing shuts down, it just causes gridlock. So really one of the primary reasons was to keep that transportation link open, and also to being adjacent to the hospital district. But it was a lot to do with transportation when the city went to ask the state infrastructure board to help out with the funding.
Yeah, no question at all, Mr. Mayor, that the is one of the slides that Matt showed us, that flooding that comes down that street was like it was own little river, and we saw the emergency vehicles that were stranded, and you always had to plan your day if there was a storm was coming, what time to leave to get to your destination to avoid that crosstown. It was a mess. You're right on point with the transportation component of that. All right, let's move on to the last item. This is our agenda got amended to add approval of a permanent encroachment regarding the Ralph Johnson VA healthcare system. So let's see, where's the Rose? I'm gonna call on the Yellow Rose, Charleston to,
Mr. Chair, we need to have a motion and a second to amend the agenda because this popped up after the deadline, Wednesday at 5 o'clock last week. So let's please start with that if you don't mind.
hi, there is an item number.
So moved.
So there's a motion to amend the agenda to add that item. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussions or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. So thank you, Ms. Copeland, for keeping us legitimate.
Full-time job, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
So Matt Fountain is here who can speak more to the actual logistics, but this popped up last week. The VA hospital is currently trying to build their parking garage or rebuild their parking garage. And in order to get the Army Corps permit, they need to hear from the city to get a permanent encroachment to put this garage over one of our water lines. And so that's why Matt's here to talk about the actual logistics behind this.
Mr. Fountain.
And
you're
I
back.
can clarify that a little bit from Ms. Copeland's description. It was a good description, Julia, but basically the VA is coming in to do an expansion to their parking deck. They're going to build basically a second parking deck to the south of their existing parking deck. If you're familiar with the facility, if not, I can pull up a map. It's basically the area of the large open parking lot on the south end of their facility. The way they do this contract is they're actually running through the Army Corps of Engineers as basically the project manager for their construction work. The Army Corps of Engineers wants to move to a design build procurement to finalize design on the project and look to start construction by early next year. And a lot of that ties into how the federal funding timelines work for the VA. In order to move to releasing that bid for their RFP, the Corps basically requires assurances from the city that it's meeting its permit requirements. Interestingly, the federal entities tend to be exempt from most city permitting and regulatory processes, but there's a few environmental areas where they're still required to comply. So this is one of the areas where they did want to get confirmation from the city that we were open to the approach. Trying to summarize it, basically, they would like to install, they have 2 phases of project due to their federal funding processes, and we can get into that in far more detail if we need to, but it gets extensively confusing. Basically, the parking deck is a standalone structural project. They then have a follow-on project phase to do infrastructure improvements on their site, which include improvements to stormwater for the site to help to meet some of their stormwater manual requirements to basically improve flooding in the area, since as we all know, this is one of the more flood impacted areas in the city. They also have this current stormwater outfall pipe, about a 60-inch concrete pipe that runs through the center of that parking deck in a city easement across their federal property. So they need to relocate that pipe as part of their follow-on infrastructure and stormwater improvement work. But what they're looking for basically is permission to leave that pipe in place during the construction component of their parking lot project until they start the construction component of their infrastructure project, which is the follow-on project to the primary project. The director of the VA, associate director, has written us a letter indicating that they have the federal funding for both of these projects. They have their approval and they're in their process on design in support of that, basically that request. It is admittedly an unusual request in that we generally don't allow infrastructure under larger buildings because of the increased liability and cost to the city. The way they've proposed it, we should be somewhat shielded from that liability, and that the construction contractor for the parking deck work would obviously be responsible for the infrastructure, preserving the infrastructure while they're in construction on their facility. And if they do show that they have their funding lined up for that follow-on infrastructure improvement project, which the Corps is also aware of and is doing their project management work for, which would then shift that pipe once the construction contractor is basically no longer liable or under warranty for the condition of the pipe. So again, there is some liability. There's always risk with multiple project phases like this, but the VA is incredibly adamant that they need this setup in order to be able to get their projects to move forward. They've contacted us. They've had the Army Corps Colonel contact us, advocating for us to consider this project approach. So we brought it to committee for consideration. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I want to know about the somewhat protection of liability, the scope one that Pat just mentioned. And this sounds concerning. You muted.
Me, Chairman, committee members, I just wanted to let you all know that recreation starts at 4 p.m.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You know, there are things that we can put in this encouragement document to protect ourselves, but like I said, like Matt Fountain spelled out to you, that is presently where we are. They need this. This is why we're here. We're under exigent circumstances. They need this for the core permission to move forward. And we can put something in this permit to protect ourselves as best we can.
I bet we can. Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Chairman and fellow council members, I know, as Matt said, this isn't our normal modus operandi. At the end of the day, we're supporting our Veterans Administration, and the fact that they really have the most screwy and complicated funding mechanism, getting money from Uncle Sam. And they get these windows, and if they can't move the project forward the way it's described to me, then they lose the money. And they have so much on the drawing board, more than on the drawing board. This garage, a new hospital facility facing up on B Street, a total remake of the whole property. And honestly, if they falter early in the game here, I think it would be a negative impact on them getting all of their long range plans. I mean, I know who wants to trust the federal government, right? But you know, we have 75,000 veterans here. They use the hospital. They, in all good faith, both the VA and the Corps are telling us they're going to follow through with the other drainage improvements as the second phase. I think we just need to take them to their word. I feel confident this is what they're going to do, and Julia's put as much protection in there as she can for us, but we really want to help them out and be able to move forward.
Yeah, there's no question, Mayor, that we need to be good partners with the VA, and but we got to also cross our T's and dot our I's.
That's right, and I think that's what we're doing. I think that's what we're doing.
Mr. Appel, Councilmember Appel.
One little minor thought. I hadn't had a chance to get into the weeds on this one, but is the contractor being required to post a bond or something to that effect in the city's favor, so that if God forbid there is a problem, we can, you know, get relief from the surety as opposed to having to chase some contractor around?
Yeah, so that should be one of the discussions with, so they're doing a design build contract. One of their contractual items as they move through that design build contract should be, and generally always is, with that, even, I shouldn't say even federal, generally federal procurement is the most rigorous in terms of the protections and the requirements. So I mean, typically there would be a performance and payments bond that would cover any impacts to the project site by the contractor. So yes, and that's something that I think Ms. Copeland mentioned, we'll try to incorporate, make sure we as a city are incorporating and verifying as part of the encroachment permit that they are properly protecting the project site as part of their construction. The upside and downside here too is that if there is a problem with the pipe, the majority of the flooding will likely occur on their own property. But there is some potential risk at McLennan Banks for additional flooding. Also, admittedly, the pipe that is immediately upstream connecting McLennan Banks through MUSC to this facility is on a pipe that goes underneath a MUSC parking garage that the city permitted in the 90s. So I'm not saying it's our current plan, but we also have a somewhat similar repair requirement. If we ever need to repair the drainage pipes that are installed as part of West Edge, they're also required to be impaired with trenchless technologies, which again, it significantly increase cost to the city if it were to happen. But it's not an impossible precedent. I think it's something that the city has been approving for a number of years. we just try to stay away from it because of the increased costs.
Also, to
Got
your
it.
point, Councilman Appel, we haven't started working on the actual document yet. So any insight or suggestions you want to throw in, we're happy to consider.
Sounds good. Sounds like y'all are on top of it, and I think that that provides certainly a layer of protection. I think, and should there be a very serious problem.
I don't think we've got a motion on the floor yet. I know we've moved to amend the agenda, but I will now entertain a motion to approve item I1.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion?
And
Comment?
the bottom line is, at the end of the day, when they do the second phase drainage improvements, they will relocate the pipe and the easement around the building, so it won't be under the building anymore. That's correct?
Yes, that is their current plan, Mayor. Yes.
Yeah.
We'll have to come back to council probably to abandon and relocate that easement.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? The ayes have it. Anything else for the good of the order? Yeah, very good meeting, as always, very informative. This is what our community is looking for us to take care of these issues, all of them, from trash and debris pickup to a $200 million project to helping out our veterans. So I think we covered a plethora of topics and issues today. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you all. And I know Chairman Shealy is anxiously ready to get his Recreation Committee meeting going. So
Great.
we'll sign off, and I'll see some of y'all at the next meeting and tomorrow. Take care, Mary. Get better.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you.